Welcome once again to the J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with ink, pen and ink. So have your kneaded eraser, a number 2 or an HB pencil handy, and any type of ink that you would like to use. But make sure that it's archival, that it's permanent, that it's black, and a smooth ink. And let's start doing some ink drawing. Okay, let's try something else. There's our sphere, and it's nice and dark and black, like a sphere should be. So what I'd like to do now is what we call negative drawing, where we're going to draw everything in between, and then whatever's positive is going to come through. So we're going to use words here. It's a little easier, and we'll just use a sign. So I'm just going to make a little rectangle. That rectangle represents a little sign. Maybe a little sign by the side of the road. Maybe it's on a post, so I'm gonna do this little old-timey post. Maybe it's an old tree stump, and somebody's nailed this to it. Maybe there's a little nail sticking out right there, and maybe there's a little grass under the sign that's about like that. Okay, something is written on that sign that's painted on there, and what should we write there? No fishing. How about that? So I'm just going to write the word no fishing. F-I-S-H-I-N. No fishing. We'll do it like hillbilly sign. So now what we're going to do is as we draw, we're going to leave out the areas around the letters. Now, here's one way you can do it. If you wanted to, you could like make little bubbled style letters, or you could go around the letter and say, okay, I'm going to make this a little bit wider, or you can just leave it out completely. It's kind of up to you how you do it. But remember, all this is going to get erased anyway. Okay. Now, again, this is our guide. It's fairly simple. There's not anything here that's too complex. But we're going to use some little dots and dashes to create some texture here using line. The first thing I want to do is I want to kind of establish where everything goes. So here's my sign. I'm just going to do some little broken line. You can use little dots and dashes like this. Sometimes you might need a long line. Sometimes you need just a little dot or a little dash. You don't need a lot. Okay, so keep it simple. Maybe my edges, maybe the sign is getting old and it's starting to wear. So maybe I want just a couple little dots and dashes along the edges. And maybe it's cracked. Maybe I've got a little crack that runs through there. Wherever your lettering is, you want to leave that kind of out. And again, if you're thinking to yourself, oh, maybe that's a really light edge, just go ahead and leave it out. Just a couple little dots and dashes. You can always add more later on. Where the tree stump is, if you want to do kind of like a little ellipse, right there where the tree stump is, and then do a couple little swirls inside that. That represents the rings, tree rings. What do you call those? Tree rings? Yeah, the life rings, whatever. That kind of represents where it was cut off, you know. And oftentimes it'll kind of get some texture there, especially with weather. And maybe some tree bark to the side. Maybe some just dots and dashes. And as you go to the edge, you do more line, and then when you come to the center, you do less line. So it's like this, where you start out more line, and you come to the center, and there's less, just little dots and dashes. And then more line. And if you shake a little bit, that's okay. That'll make it look like tree bark, like it's a little bumpy. And I can do that same thing below here as it comes into the grass. I can come out and say, well, there's some tree bark down in here, and there's going to be more on the outside, less towards the center. And you can curve it like we did our sphere. That's called contour line. So when we talk about contour, it curves with your object. And if you want a little shadow under there, you just hatch through it. You just hatch through it and say, oh, okay, there's a little shadow of that board right there. And I can hatch through that. Hatch, 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 hatch. And it kind of creates a little shadow under there. Well, as far as our sign goes, we want to leave out the words and do something in between there. You can do little just horizontal lines, or if you want it to look kind of like wood, you can start out with a little oval or a little ellipse and say, well, there's a knot in the wood right there. So you put in a little swirl, and then you can come with little lines around that swirl. You can even curve it down here. Just little dots and dashes. And it'll give the illusion that it's kind of wood. And you can add more or less, however you want to do it. But when you get to the letter, just stop. You can even go through the letter. So like if this little line came out here, I can go through the letter here, stop there. I can come through here and stop there. This is called negative drawing. I'm drawing everything around it and leaving out whatever's there. So rather than draw a line around the letters, I'm just leaving it out. And again, I can always come back in and add more. And just have fun with this. Just think of wood. Maybe look at your fake desks there because they have fake wood on them. And think, oh, maybe there's a little knot over here. Do the little knot right there. And when you're all done, the letters will come through. And you can even, it's even better once you take out that pencil, that eraser, and erase your pencil. And nobody ever knows that you used your pencil to figure out where things go. And if you need to, add a little more line here and there. Try not to. You're just kind of ignoring those little spots, and you just leave them out. Just ignore them. When you're all done, it'll come through. None of those lines have to be even either. I mean, just kind of have fun with it. Here's another knot. You just throw those in wherever you feel like you want to put them. To get rid of the rest of my graphite, I always like that part. I think the graphite kind of makes it look dirty. Now, as you're going through, if you can't read your letters, you can do little lines around it, little dots and dashes to make them kind of come through. So I can come through and just little dots and dashes, and that'll make my letters stand out a little bit more if you want. And the rule of thumb is anything on the bottom is going to be a little darker. So I may want to go back into this edge and just do a couple little darker edges, little lines that kind of go through and darken that in, because it's a little shadow. Plus, I don't know if you've ever looked at objects that have been out in the weather, but as it rains, minerals kind of deposit along the bottom edges. They get a little darker. The top edges, sometimes they rot, they get a little lighter, the sun will bleach them. The other thing is there might be a little shadow on the ground up there, and maybe there's some grass growing next to it. So if I do these little feathered lines where I just drop it in and do a little flip, and just go, okay, here's some grass. There's one that's bent down there, grass. Here's one with a little wheat top to it, maybe a little leaf. They're just little lines. There's some grass there. And there, you know, I didn't have to draw every little blade of grass. You just do these little flippy lines, some going one way, some going the other. There's your grass. Piece of cake. And it's just like little scribbles. You can even have some coming up from behind that just kind of come away. Okay, that's called negative drawing, where you're drawing the textures and everything in between, and whatever's on the surface kind of comes through. And again, you could write whatever it is that you wanted to write in there. And if you want it to kind of come through a little bit more, just a couple little dots and dashes around the edges, and you got it.